What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be taking a look at a bit of Star Wars lore that not everyone might be familiar with, and that is the story of how Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine were actually almost assassinated. This story takes place in the novel Lords of the Sith by Paul S. Kemp, and although it is about 5 or 6 years old now, I thought I'd better just mention that there will obviously be some heavy spoilers for the book in this video. So if you did want to read the book on your own, I would definitely recommend clicking away right now, but if you are interested in just hearing the story, then this is definitely the video for you. If you end up enjoying the video, then be sure to leave a like down below and feel free to subscribe to the channel for more Star Wars content. But with that out of the way, let's get stuck right into it. So like I said, this story takes place in the novel Lords of the Sith, and honestly this may be one of my favourite Star Wars books that I've read, definitely in the top 5 anyway. The story mainly focuses on Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine, but there is also a large focus on a rebel group known as the Free Ryloth movement, who are essentially just rebelling against the Empire exclusively on Ryloth. So they're not technically the Rebel Alliance or anything just yet, but they are still what you'd refer to as rebels. Now, the leader of the Free Ryloth movement is actually Cham Syndulla, who some of you may know from both the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and as the name probably suggests, he is actually Hera Syndulla's father, so he's a relatively well-known character within the rebel movement in the early days of the Galactic Empire. Ryloth had come under control by the Empire, at least partly anyway, and Cham and his fellow rebels were working in the shadows to try and just sort of undo what the Empire was doing on their planet, as is the story with pretty much all of these small rebellions that we see throughout Star Wars. It wasn't really anything more than that. They weren't really trying to completely rebel against the Empire or win the war or anything like that. They simply just wanted peace and prosperity on their home planet and were doing what they could to try and keep the Empire away. Now, Cham had a connection to the Empire in Colonel Balcor Dre, who had been working as a spy for the Free Ryloth movement purely to just undermine his superior officer in Moff Dalian Mors, essentially committing treason against the Empire purely to just remove her from her position as Moff, which would then allow Balcor to finally become a Moff, which was his ultimate goal. Now, little did Balcor know that he was in much deeper than he initially thought he was, as Cham had him wrapped around his little finger and eventually let him know that no matter what Balcor did, he would never be able to get out of their little arrangement, as Cham would gladly turn him over to the Empire if it came to it, and if he ran away, the Empire would obviously notice anyway, and they would eventually hunt him down. So Balcor was essentially trapped by Cham and had to pretty much follow any orders that he gave him, or else it would not end well for Balcor. While all of this was happening, there was also some more treason being committed within the Empire, as one of the senators of Ryloth, Orn Free Tar, who was seen as an ally of the Empire, was actually helping the Free Ryloth movement as well, and Palpatine knew this all along. Palpatine decided to expose the traitor that had been leaking information to the Free Ryloth movement, so he tells Orn Free Tar that both himself and Darth Vader will be paying a visit to Ryloth alongside the senator, but disguises it as a visit to investigate a disruption on the planet. Word of their proposed visit reached Cham Syndulla via Orn Free Tar, as he obviously had no idea just yet that Palpatine is onto him, and with the very rare opportunity that Palpatine and Vader will both be visiting their planet and within reach, Cham and his group decide that the only way they'll ever see true freedom on Ryloth again is to remove the head from the snake by assassinating Palpatine and Darth Vader. Now, it's made very clear throughout the book that no one actually understands just how powerful Palpatine actually is. He's seen as an old man with a great mind for tactics and a plan to overtake the galaxy, but it is a secret to only Darth Vader and a very select few others within the Empire that he is in fact a Sith Lord. And so, as stupid as it might seem that these rebels thought they could assassinate him, they were never actually aware of who he really is. We find out throughout the story that even Palpatine's royal guards, those within the Empire who spend probably the most time with and around Palpatine, don't even know of his power either, and they're so loyal and well trained that once they do eventually see his raw power and what he's actually capable of, they are to never speak of it to anyone, even amongst themselves. So even those who do know of his power are completely secretive of the fact that he is obviously a Force user, and the most powerful Force user at that. Now anyway, Cham and the rebels set up some traps for the Empire once they hear that Palpatine will be visiting, laying hundreds of small mines throughout the section that their Star Destroyer will be visiting from, and when the Imperials do arrive, they quickly find themselves in a bit of trouble. The Star Destroyer takes some very heavy damage, and after a quick battle in which Vader absolutely dominates multiple rebel squadrons, both Palpatine, Vader and a handful of royal guards escape ISD Perilous moments before it's actually destroyed, killing many of the Imperials on board. After seeing the destruction that Vader had caused and realizing just how powerful and seemingly unstoppable he really is, Cham and his group are suspicious that Vader and Palpatine are still alive, and so they pursue them through the debris of the Star Destroyer. They catch up to their shuttle and have them in a very dangerous spot before Vader actually force chokes their pilot from all the way over in their own shuttle, causing them to crash into each other, sending both shuttles into the atmosphere of Ryloth and eventually crashing in different locations. Most of the guards aboard the shuttle were killed, however Palpatine, Vader and 2 royal guards, one who is actually a clone trooper, all survive and find themselves stranded on Ryloth. Now, while the assassination attempt hadn't quite gone as planned so far, Cham and the group are still adamant that they must make the most of the situation and finish off what they started. It's obviously not every day that Palpatine is crash landed on their planet and seemingly stranded, so they continue to pursue the 2 Sith, still not knowing what they're really in for. Cham sends multiple freighters after the 2 Sith, firing down at them on the surface, thinking that there's no chance they could possibly survive blaster fire from such powerful ships. However, Vader and Palpatine both show their power, with Vader actually managing to block the flurry of blaster fire from the ships and returning the shots to take down the freighter, while Palpatine actually unleashes his Force Lightning on the other freighter, zapping it out of the sky like a bug to plummet to the planet's surface. As mentioned earlier, the 2 royal guards were astonished by what they'd seen, as they were clueless about Palpatine's true power, but they don't dare to even speak of it between themselves, essentially acting like nothing had even happened. Now, with all the ruckus that had happened during that battle, a large group of Lilacs, a native creature feared by all who lived there, were drawn towards the Imperial group and attacked, being somewhat easily destroyed by the 2 Sith. Lilacs are described in a very similar way to the Acklay creatures that are seen throughout Star Wars, most notably in Attack of the Clones. Not quite the same, but very similar to these beasts, and so the fact that Vader and Palpatine took them out with ease was yet another crazy feat that showed their true power. They cleared off one herd of the creatures, however they knew there would be many more to come, so they made their way away from the scene of the battle to make a camp overnight and plan their way off the planet. Eventually, the rest of the Lilac horde catches up to Palpatine, Vader and the royal guards, and they're forced into a tunnel system in order to take the fight into their own hands. However, the tunnel system actually turns out to be a huge Lilac nest. Miraculously though, as impossible as it seemed in the book, Vader and Palpatine completely outsmart and annihilate the Lilacs, taking out essentially the entire horde against all odds and eventually escape from the tunnel system. The rebels, who were hot on the tail of the group, finally stumble across the Lilac nest and are beyond shocked when they see what Vader had done to the horde, as they're still not aware of Palpatine's power, so to them it seems like this was all the work of Darth Vader himself. They realise that these 2 are not to be messed with, but that if they ever want the galaxy to go back to the way it was, that they had to take Vader out, at which point they could also kill Palpatine and restore order. So despite seeing what they had, they knew what had to be done. It was seen as all but a suicide mission after realising how powerful Vader truly was, but they decided to finish their plan one way or another. After surviving the Lilac nest, the Sith eventually get back in contact with the Empire and request a pickup once they make it to safety. However, Balcor hears of it and is still hoping to remove Moff Mors from her position, as well as actually hoping to kill Vader and the Emperor as well. So he sends his own fighters to try and bomb the location, hoping to take out Palpatine, Vader and Cham Syndulla, which would reflect poorly on Moff Mors and become a huge win for Balcor. Unfortunately for him, his plan is foiled and Mors knows that he's a traitor, so she orders his own troopers, who technically still work for her, to take him out. The entire plan from both Cham and Balcor ends up being thwarted, and Mors sends in as many troops as she can to safely evacuate the Emperor, obviously being successful in stopping the assassination attempt, which was so close to success multiple times before miserably failing in the end. Despite Vader and Palpatine surviving and fighting off hundreds of enemies to do so, this was the closest that they had ever come to any true dangers so far in the timeline, and it's crazy to think that if Balcor and Cham were actually on the same page rather than constantly trying to undermine the other, that they could possibly have been successful in their initial plan, taking out Palpatine and Vader and both getting what they want, but it wasn't to be in the end. Now that's obviously a very short summary of the story compared to the book itself, and so if you are interested in learning it all, then I would definitely recommend reading the entire thing. No summary can ever truly explain how great this book was, and like I said earlier, it may be one of my favourite Star Wars novels so far. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.
Crush them! Make them suffer!